So we'll call the June 8th, 2022 meeting of the Transportation Commission to order. Joe, if you could read the instructions, please.
You bet. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. All panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Please continue to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. City staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the Transportation Commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. Aiden, could you call the roll, please?
Charles Miazzi. Don't see him yet. Barbara Harrington McKinney. I don't see yet. Chris McCahill.
Here.
Ann Kovich.
Here.
Denise Jess.
Here.
Robbie Weber.
Here.
Patricia Bennett, who is excused. Bridget Brown.
Here.
Bill Bremer.
Here.
Harold Kleems was running a few minutes late. And Darren Wozniewski.
Here.
Okay, so at this point, Darren, you are able to vote. So, as we have things that we might need to vote on. Okay. Everybody have an opportunity to look at the minutes from the last meeting. Chris?
I move approval.
Okay, there's a motion. Robbie?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, we'll assume unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried. Public comment. I understand we have someone registered to speak. We do also have some written emails that were distributed and saved in Legistar. Is that correct that we have someone who wishes to speak?
Yeah, but they're not in the list.
Oh, I see Harold joined us. But hi Harold, I think you're still able, both of you, because we're missing 3. Am I correct, Aiden?
I think Alder Harrington McKinney just joined.
Okay, I'm not. Oh, there she is. Okay. All right. So we're missing Alder Miazzi and Pat Bennett. Correct?
Yep.
Okay. So that would mean both Harold and Darren could vote at this point in time, unless I don't believe
I'm going to be on mute and I'm driving, but I am attending here.
Okay. Thanks for letting us know, Alder. But I think both of you would be able to vote at this point because we have 2 missing. Is that correct, Aiden?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And we'll watch that as we go. But we have someone who's ready to speak, but they haven't arrived yet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So why don't we watch for that person, and then we can, if everyone's agreeable to this, we could come back and listen to them when they do join. Everybody be okay with that? If you're not, why don't you raise your hand? Okay. All right. So we'll come back to public comment. Any disclosures or recusals this evening? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. So for the consent agenda this evening, We had items 2 and item 3. I don't believe we have anybody registered to speak on 2 or 3 or registered at all. Do we, Aiden or Joe?
Correct.
Okay. Did anyone wish to have either of the items separated from the consent agenda? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. So we're looking at including on the consent agenda item Legistar 71938, the approval of the annual TC work plan, and Legistar 71937, approval of the TC handbook and special rules. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Bill?
Make a motion for approval.
Okay, there's a motion for items 2 and 3. Darren?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. We'll assume no discussions. This is the consent agenda. So we'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or be recorded as abstaining. If so, please raise your hand or let me know. Okay, seeing none, the motion is approved. Okay, and Joe or Aiden, would you let me know if the person who is registered for item 1 comes back in to the queue?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll move on to item 4. Jim Wolf, are you there? This would be Westtown Path Phase 3.
I actually
should be presenting this one.
Yeah.
All right.
I will.
Exactly.
I can present. Yep.
Okay.
You guys hear me okay? Just make sure.
Yeah, yes, we can. Do we have any, let me just ask, do we have anybody registered to speak on item 4?
We do not.
Okay. And it is our practice anyway to have a presentation from staff and then hear from the public and then have our discussion. So, Aaron, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Should I get the right thing? All right, you're seeing the PDF presentation?
We are.
All right. So, hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Canton with the Street Section Engineering, and I am today looking for your review and feedback for the Westtown Path Phase 3 project. So first off, just wanted to show an overview of the existing Westtown Path corridor. This map shows that corridor. The green is existing path. The orange is future path, not this project. And then the red is this project, Phase 3. We're on the far west side of town, creating a path connection that would fill a gap between Commerce and Junction Road. Mentioned this Westtown Path is an important connection, especially for the far west side, connecting to downtown Madison and the general path network. And then a future phase of it here between Gammon and High Point is something in the works and looking at getting that built as well in the next few years. But today we'll be focusing on the Phase 3 portion. And here is a zoomed in exhibit of that. So essentially what we're proposing to do here to connect existing paths at Commerce Drive and South Junction is reconstruct the north side of Plaza Drive and Watts Road, reconstruct the curb here, pushing the curb out into the street and replacing the existing 5-foot concrete sidewalk with a widened 10-foot multi-use asphalt path that would be off-street and curb and terrace separated from car traffic. And all this would stay within the existing city right-of-way, kind of going through, starting on the eastern end, we would be reconstructing, widening out the ramps at the Commerce Drive crossing here, extending the path onto the north side of Plaza Drive. I'll mention that we would be maintaining existing car travel lanes on Plaza Drive, but removing the existing on-street bike lanes on Plaza in place of the off-street path. This is to provide that room, staying within the city right-of-way. But the existing car travel lanes, one in each direction, and two-way turn lane on Plaza would be maintained. And the path would follow on the north side. There would be some commercial driveway crossings throughout. We're proposing to do green markings as they are commercial driveways. And then continuing to the south, the path here would turn, bend, and then continue onto the north side of Watts Road. Here, the north side of Watts Road would be reconstructed, removing the existing on-street bike lane in that direction on Watts, the westbound on-street bike lane, and then making sure that we have a nice widened ramp that allows for continuation of somebody coming westbound on-street bike lane on Watts to be able to get onto that off-street path. I'll mention that the car travel lanes on Watts Road would be maintained, and this area is a little bit old, but the eastbound on-street bike lane on Watts would also be maintained. Here again, some commercial drive crossings where we would do some green paint at those crossings. And then that path would continue and then reconstruct the South Junction Road crossing here, continue the path onto the existing off-street multi-use path on Junction Road that goes north-south and continues up to Mineral Point. Mention a future BRT station north of here. So the path will kind of work nicely with the placement of that BRT station. And then at the Junction Road crossing, we'll actually reconstruct the signal here to install a bike-specific signal that to help maximize efficiency through that crossing. So there would be a separated bike and pedestrian crossing here. Bike signal obviously taking less time as it would be for bikes. And that would just help to keep efficiency for all users there. And then moving back at the Watts and Plaza intersection here, hearing some more pedestrian-focused concerns about this crossing, proposing here to reconstruct the Type 1 curb ramps at all four corners with a nicer Type 2 lined-up ramps, and then also widening or extending out the median islands on Watts Road to create a better pedestrian refuge there. And that pretty much sums up this project. This is funded through the Transportation Alternative Program. So it's federally funded through WSDOT, so going through the full WSDOT process with it. And it would be constructed in 2023. And we did have a public meeting for this back last month. Didn't get a ton of comment there, but the public meeting is posted to the project webpage. And with that, I can open up to any questions.
Okay, questions or comments for Aaron? Robbie, go ahead.
So it's a little unclear to me. The intersection of Plaza and Watts, the northwest corner, it looks like there's some, I can't quite tell what that sort of straight line corner is there. But my question is, the path turn seems to be kind of sharp for a multi-use path. And is there any way to bump out the corner and make that turning radius a little less sharp, a little wider for the bicyclists, and maybe bump it out and make it less a sharper turn for the motor vehicles there?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we did look at when setting this new curb line, and that radius there looked at still accommodating a larger vehicle being able to make that turn and tighten it up as much as we thought was possible, but can definitely revisit that. Another thing we could potentially look at is maybe having a little bit of a wider path through that curve to just give a little bit extra room. Obviously, still want to make sure that those ramps are comfortable in ADA, but I think that could definitely help that. And it is, unfortunately, it is a sharp bend and kind of the situation when we're trying to build it within the right of way, but can definitely revisit that curb return radius and also look at widening the path through there.
Because I just I see people either biking over the grass or intruding onto the ramps or something like that. It just seems like it's going to be really tough to make that a viable path and still have people maybe waiting to cross. if they're on foot or even on bike. I don't suppose we have any city right of way on the inside of the sidewalk there that might be able to make it a little wider there.
Not that I'm aware of, but can definitely inquire and see if there's something possible there to try and improve that corner.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Robbie. Alder Harrington McKinney, go ahead.
Thank you very much. You mentioned that there was a public meeting around this presentation. Are we notified? Did I miss something? And how do I know when there's a public meeting around something that's going to come before us? I just want to be educated.
Yes. So we had the public meeting, and generally we'll coordinate them with the alders ahead of time and make sure that they're able to join if they'd like, and then invite them to the presentation. And usually, look to coordinate all public meetings, I would say about a month out or so from when they're held.
So, Aaron, let me interrupt here. Jim and Alder Harrington McKinney, see if this would address your concern. You know, at the beginning of each project year, we pick out which projects are going to come to the Transportation Commission. Rather than just including the alders for that particular district or impacted districts on the invitation list for public meetings, could you also include the Transportation Commission members for any of the projects that are slated to come to the Transportation Commission? Would that address your concern, Alder? So you would get an invitation to any public meetings on items that they know would be planning to come to the TC?
Better educate me and actually hear what the voices are. And so we're not the alders of that specific area, but definitely being able, if we choose and have the time to do it, to sit in, because I always like to hear what the voices of the ones that are most impacted and what those voices are saying. Thank you.
Sure. And Jim, maybe you can think about how we could accomplish that. I mean, I know the meetings are published on your website, I believe, but the members of the commission probably don't keep track of which projects are going to come to us. So they may miss the meeting, by not realizing that it's coming to the Transportation Commission. So maybe you can think about how we could handle that notification. Jim, did you have any comments about that?
My initial thought is, so whenever we're holding one of these public meetings, we will also send out hard copy invitations to folks usually immediately around the project or close by. And then we could add the Transportation Commission as a carbon copy on that invitation. There's a number of other city staff and various agencies that are at least notified that a public meeting is being held. So we could add the Transportation Commission to that list for projects that we know will be coming to the commission.
Yeah, I mean, how do people feel about that? It would let you know and let you sit in if it's a project of interest. Would people? It sounds like Alder Harrington McKinney would appreciate that. Would others appreciate that as well? Harold, you want to go ahead?
Well, this is not in this point, so I'll wait if anybody else has anything to say about the procedural part of this.
Yeah. Well, why don't we try it, Jim? And that way people can know that public meetings are coming up. And then Yang has his hand up, so maybe I'll ask his thoughts about it. Go ahead, Yang.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, just pointing out that I know that Alder Niazi is interested in that as well. So
okay.
Yeah,
well, why don't we try?
Thank you.
Why don't we go ahead and try that, Jim? And then if people aren't interested, they just don't need to attend.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay,
so, Madam
great.
Chair, Madam Chair, because I consider myself new on this board, it's important for me to really get a feel of what's happening, and so that is my personal request. Others might not need it because they've been on this board for a period of time, but it just works best for me. So thank you very much for accommodating me.
Sure, and I would say that maybe had I been, if we're reminded of meetings that are coming up for a big project, Lake Mendota Drive is a great example. Maybe if we had that invitation in our inbox, people might be inclined to attend. So why don't we try it and see how it works, and it'll notify people, and then they can choose to attend if they would like. So thank you, Jim, and Yang for that feedback. And Alder Harrington McKinney, thanks for that suggestion. And Alder Miadzi as well. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I want to emphasize what Robbie said about that corner. And it looked for me, especially people coming westbound on Watts and turning onto the path at Plaza, the way the ramp looks there, like that turn seems to be like that really sharp angle there. Maybe that's something that could be smoother. I'm not sure if too many people are going to make that right turn there, but it seems to be built mostly for people going straight. The other question I had was, you mentioned there are all these commercial driveways. One of them is a gas station, so that will have high motor volumes. The other ones is, I think, the Aldi grocery store, which probably has pretty high volumes. I think the other ones are employment locations where I'm less sure about the volume. And so I'm not totally sure what we can do. You mentioned green paint, but with the two-way bike facility, it's really thinking about what can we do to not have these conflicts there. And I'm not sure if you have an answer for that, but I do have some concerns about that. Maybe not now when traffic volumes on the path are not going to be that high, but as you said, there will be a connection to the BRT terminus. There might be development happening on the other side of Watts Road in the next couple of years. So thinking about that with two-way bike facilities, what can we do with the driveways?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, I would just say regarding that is an excellent point about westbound Watts on-street bike traffic turning on and going north. Could definitely look at how we rework that intersection, making the path turn smoother, and then maybe having a ramp that allows for an easier right turn there. Makes a lot of sense. And then in terms of the commercial driveway openings, didn't have any other specifics in mind other than the green paint, but can definitely see what traffic engineering thinks about that, and to the commission if anyone has any other ideas there. You still would, a car would still have to turn up or down the apron to cross the path, so you still have a grade change for cars, but potentially there's some signage you could have on the private side to warn people coming in and out of the path there. But definitely we'll continue to think of ideas, especially as the path becomes more common, like you said, or commonly used.
Thanks. And then my final question, we received one public comment that pointed out at commercial drive, I think, which has one lane in between Watts and the Plaza Drive intersection with nice buffered bike lanes and on-street parking. But then it turns into two general travel lanes where the volume of motor vehicles, long day, seems to be pretty long. And so I'm wondering, everything is one lane until you get there, and then it becomes two lane. There's no sidewalks on part of it. There are no bike facilities. Is there a plan to change any of that? Because if we were able to do a road diet on there, then the crossing of the path at commercial would be much more comfortable if you only have to cross one lane in each direction instead of two.
Harold, for anybody who, if I can just interrupt, for anybody who may not know what road diet means, do you want to explain that, please?
Sure. Reduce the number of general travel lanes from what they are right now, either by eliminating travel lanes, moving the curb, or having a one-way travel lane in each direction with a two-way center turn lane as it is on Plaza Drive, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, reducing the number of general travel lanes in order to increase safety. I mean, that's a proven countermeasure for safety and often allows repurposing that space for sidewalks, for wider terraces, trees, for better bike lanes.
Thanks. We've seen that strategy used quite a bit recently, but I'm not sure it was always called that. So I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. So go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I was just going to say we did receive that comment and talk internally, and I don't think it's in the scope of this project to remark Commerce Drive going to the north, because you'd have to do it all the way up to Mineral Point Road, but definitely was added to the list of potential future project, and I think would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I can jump in. That's the unfortunate thing. Like, this is a very, very particular project with federal funding, so it's not so easy to increase the scope, but this definitely is on our list. It would ideally, depending on how, obviously our Safe Streets program, like maybe it could rank out to be done kind of in conjunction with this, but, expanding that federal scope isn't something that we're able to do.
Yeah, I understand that. But yeah, I think if that could be made possible, because otherwise, you're going to pour some curb that then you have to remove or move after you've done the road diet, which kind of seems wasteful. So thinking about, if it can be combined by using other sources of funding, or like at least having a plan and building part of it for that way, I think that would be really great. Thanks. That's all I have. Oh, sorry. One more thing. Is the crossing at Junction Road, you said you're going to install bike-specific signal. Is the idea that that's going to be automated recall, or do people have to push a button, or will there be a sensor to detect people as they approach?
I definitely, that is a traffic engineering question. I'm not sure if Jerry Shippa is here to speak on it, but I do believe we would put in some loops to have it have a detection to detect if a bike is coming up. I believe we would include that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Jerry's not here, but that would be our plan. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, and Renee, sounds like a good strategy that we might be able to use Safe Streets Madison funding to work in conjunction with this project. Darren, before we go to you, Alder Miazzi, you had your hand up earlier. Did you have something that you wanted to say, or did it get already said? I just wanted to make sure we didn't get lost.
Oh, thank you, Chair, for noticing that. And actually, it was already answered. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Just wanted to make sure we didn't miss you. Darren, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to share some insight to Harald's comment about the tension between the autos and the bike crossing at the commercial entrances there. I missed the first meeting in May because I was traveling with Gil Penalosa, who is the founder of 880 Cities, and a couple engagements in Wisconsin. And in his presentation, he actually happened to have a potential solution for this. There was a mayor, and I forget which city it is, but I could definitely find out where, but had the same problem. And they ended up just putting stop signs prior to the cars would enter into the crossing for the bike to make them stop beforehand, before entering into that space for the bicycles. So they recognize that. So just offering that up as a potential solution. And I can definitely contact him more if you want to learn what city that was in.
Would that be helpful, Renee and Aaron?
I'm always interested in what Gil's doing, for sure. And I think, I don't know if these ones have stop signs now, these path crossings, but I know we have done that. So, but yeah, Darren, feel free to send it my way.
Great. Thank you, Darren. Other comments? Or Aaron, did you have any comments in response to that?
No, I'll just echo what Renee said. Definitely feel free to share.
Okay, great. Anybody have any other comments on this one? Okay, did you get everything you needed, Aaron and Renee?
I believe so. Renee, did you have any other?
No, I think that's really great input, everyone. So thank you.
Okay. Awesome. Do we have the person who wanted to speak on item number 1 here yet?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we move to item 5, West Main Street Bike Boulevard improvements.
That is going to be me again.
Okay.
Reshare. So, yep, this is the other project that is also, I'll mention, also federally funded and funding through WSTOT. So going through that process and is a limited funding. So doing what we can with what we have. But getting right into it. This is the West Main Street Bike Boulevard Improvements Project, existing bike boulevard on Main between Brittingham and the Capitol Square, looking to make some spot improvements there. Here's an overview exhibit of those improvements, kind of getting right into it, starting on the southwesterly end. One of the major parts of this project is installing an RFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacon, at the Proudfit crossing to help both bikes and pedestrians get across Proudfit, continuing on Main both ways. It's a difficult crossing now, as I'm sure many of you are well aware, and would be well served to have an RFB to help further warn drivers of someone trying to cross. So with the addition of the RFB, we would include some median island improvements, extending those median islands out to create a proper pedestrian refuge, as well as some improvements to the outer curb returns and curb ramps, making sure they're ADA compliant. And I will just real quick show a kind of general exhibit of something that came up at the PIM for this project. There was a good discussion about this crossing and about the, legality or the prioritization of bikes versus pedestrians at this crossing. And as a bike not crossing in the crosswalk doesn't have the designated right-of-way to make that crossing, we were looking to combine the pedestrian refuge and that crossing, combining bikes and pedestrians through that crossing. So extending the refuge out a little bit wider and kind of marking it, shown like here, having a combined white continental crosswalk for pedestrian and combined with the striped green markings, kind of all leading into that pedestrian refuge, as well as tightening up these curb returns on the approach sides, making sure that the RFB button is accessible, and you can click that button and be in good view of traffic on both sides. And this is something, had a good discussion at the PIM, and looking for your feedback here tonight. Otherwise, we are looking at doing a raised crossing with bump outs at the Southwest Path crossing here by the railroad tracks. Given the vicinity to the railroad, the bump outs would bump in about 5 feet or so from existing and have a raised crossing in order to better designate the path through traffic and have cars slow down and essentially act as a speed hump for crossing car traffic, including green markings through that crossing as well. And then another thing we are potentially looking into and looking at your feedback today is removing parking on both sides of Main, only between Proudfit and the Southwest Path, removing parking on this block and installing buffered bike lanes. We'll show it in the next page, but based on some recent streetlight speed and volume data, we saw the highest speeds on this block, probably cars coming pretty quickly off of Proudfit. Higher speeds make a buffered bike lane more effective here than the existing just bike boulevard situation of being mixed with car traffic. And then continuing further towards the square, looking at installing bump outs on the southern half of the Main and Bedford intersection, shown here, kind of mirroring what the opposite side of the street is, where there are bump outs today. This create a consistent feel through this intersection and improve the sidewalk ramps and that pedestrian crossing. And then the whole project will include a mill and overlay asphalt resurfacing of West Main Street from Proudfit all the way to Fairchild. with some spot curb ramp improvements, make sure that they're ADA compliant. And this project as well would happen in 2023. And generally, we would be adding wayfinding signage on West Main all the way from Brittingham to the Capitol Square, and green markings at intersections. And then, zoomed out there. Here is an overview of the streetlight traffic data and volumes and speeds on West Main. You can see the only area of higher speeding is between Proudfit and Bedford, the block where we're proposing buffered bike lanes or potentially proposing buffered bike lanes there. And then looking at, kind of between 2,500 and 3,000 average daily traffic. And then we also did get a parking study on that block from Proudfit to the Southwest Path, seeing relatively low volume use over this block, but pretty substantially heavy parking through the rest of West Main. So only proposing or looking at buffered bike lanes here. And then we held a public meeting for this back in May, had some good attendance and some good discussion, and also had a project survey along with that, got about 60 responses in total, and heard a variety of concerns and comments from folks. Definitely one of the main one was the Proudfit crossing, as well as just kind of all of the crossings through the area. And again, keeping track of all that data, have limited funding for this. So looking to do as much as we can with what we have. But yeah, I think that summarizes the project. Turn it over to any questions.
Okay, I believe we have somebody registered to speak. Renee, did you have any presentation type comments before we hear from the public?
Sure. Just that there are some other future projects coming in this area. So we definitely took feedback about the entire corridor. But we've been focused at this time on the things that were federally funded, and just getting those done, knowing that there would be some opportunities with Broome and Bassett, and potentially Henry with some future projects. And so kind of wanted to get that feedback, but knowing that we already had the funding for kind of these types of things that the original proposal had been focused on.
Okay, thanks. And Aiden, I believe we have somebody registered to speak.
So yeah, it's Tom Wilson.
Okay.
Yeah. Supports wishes to speak.
Yeah, welcome, Tom.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can. Welcome, Tom.
Okay, sorry. I'm on my phone, so it's a little bit difficult for me to hear well. Just want to speak briefly in support. I live in the neighborhood. A lot of the improvements that you've just covered are things that have long been sought by neighbors, particularly the crossings at Proudfit. I was extremely excited to hear about the at-grade crossing for the Southwest Commuter Path. As someone who moves a lot of stuff by bike, at-grade crossings are wonderful. So thank you for all the effort that's been put into this. I hope this gets supported and moves along as quickly as it can. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Anybody have any questions for Tom? Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions for Aaron and Renee? Alden Miadzi, go ahead.
Oh, just a couple of questions. Usually sometimes when you put in buffered bike lanes, sometimes you, because of the parking, what do you think, does that be sufficient parking still in the area? And also, I guess my second question is that we talk about speeding down that road. Have we thought about some kind of traffic calming before we put in those buffered bike lanes?
Sure. And I can maybe take this one, Aaron. So the parking, it's kind of an unusual situation with that parking where it doesn't qualify for the RP3 permit program. So because of that, the heaviest use is for coal center events. And so much of the time it sits empty because it's just restricted to 2 hours and you can't get a permit to be there longer. So we've definitely been working with Alder Verveer on this and looking at that area. Knowing that it's very different from the rest of the street, which is in the RP3 program. definitely, we think that the race crossing, working as a speed hump will definitely help with those high speeds. And we can certainly look at some other traffic calming options as well. So definitely good to get the feedback on that, because that's something where, this is just one option. And, the Alder Revere has been talking to us about kind of other options for this unique area.
So Alder Miazzi, I believe Alder Revere is here. Would you be interested in hearing his thoughts since he's been talking to his constituents about this?
Yes, I'm always honored to have another colleague voice their opinion.
Alder Revere, would you like to let us know what you've been hearing?
Thank you, Ann, and thank you, Charles. I was mainly here just to listen to all of your advice and feedback, and did not intend to speak tonight. But I will just say, since you asked, and thanks for the question, that I am generally very supportive of the concept that you just received from Aaron. And as Aaron already stated, we had a good turnout for the PIM. I've invited Aaron and Renee to come to a future Bassett neighborhood meeting to garner more feedback before this ultimately is finalized and goes to the Board of Public Works. The parking situation is quite unusual in this area. I think Renee covered it well. The areas that are eligible for residential parking permit program are parked full most day and night. And then there are a few blocks, mainly the 600 block of West Main, that has a 2-hour restriction and no RP3 allowance because of the kind of 50-50 split of commercial and residential uses on that block, where it technically doesn't qualify under the current ordinance for residential parking. So I don't know if I can answer any additional follow-up questions that any of you might have at this point, but again, I'm mainly here to listen and look forward to your feedback. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alder. Alder Miazzi, did that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Chris, you're next.
Thank you. I like the way that this creates sort of a gradual transition from Proudfit to what ultimately becomes like a shared residential street. I guess I'm just wondering how that transition actually happens and where. I feel like basically at the end of that first block, from Proudfit to the path, I guess at the path, the lanes end and there's like a merge. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, and actually, I forgot to mention this, but have a exhibit of kind of what that would look like as a starting point for discussion, having the buffered bike lanes on Main from Proudfit to the path, with the curb bump outs of the path. We'd want the buffered lane to end a little bit early to create, allow people to be able to merge. And it is a little bit of a funky turn. And I think, definitely seeking all of your input on this, could potentially look at some sort of like a dashed buffered line leading up to the curb bump outs in the path, or potentially just ending that a little bit earlier to kind of move bikes into the center lane a little bit more fluidly.
Yeah. The closest thing that I can think of, I don't know if anybody else has examples, is probably on Winnebago, which is closer to me, where the bike lanes approach the roundabout and then the traffic merges going into the roundabout. And I think probably having a longer lead time with that dash line is probably good, basically to give a good amount of distance for that to happen. And so if there's a car coming up, someone can decide what to do there. But I'd be curious to hear what other folks think. But otherwise, I think it's a good concept.
Renee, your thoughts in that regard?
I think that's good. We haven't totally worked out the transitions on both ends because we kind of wanted to see where people are at. We've been working with Alder Revere, but I agree, like a longer transition could be better. This is an area where you kind of go from the clinic and some residential buildings, and then it kind of transitions and there's a lot more parking and a lot, more residential kinds of things. So I think we still need to kind of work that out, but that's a good thought.
Okay, thanks. Anything else, Chris?
No, thank you.
Okay, Robbie, you're next.
Yeah, can you go back to the Proudfit intersection for a second? Did you say that you're extending the median, the refuge islands, so that bicyclists and pedestrians are going to share that refuge section? Is that what you said?
Yep, that would be the idea, and something kind of looking like the schematic. Is this coming up? Sorry, I'm not actually sure if it. Do you see a picture? No. Okay, I think I
do. I just wasn't. It's hard to see the details sometimes. It went away. The picture went away.
Yep.
But...
No, do you see a different photo now?
We do.
Oh, yeah. I see. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I think I was showing the application and not my window. So when I showed this earlier, it didn't come through. But this kind of shows more detailed what the layout we were thinking of the main Proudfit crossing would look like.
Yeah. Okay. This is the first time we're seeing this one, Aaron. Thanks.
Okay. I apologize for that.
Yeah, no problem.
This might answer my concern. My concern is basically that when you try and stuff bicyclists and pedestrians on the same refuge space, which can be quite narrow, it can get difficult, especially if you have pedestrians with, say, a stroller or a bicycle with a trailer or something like that. It's just really gets crowded in there. So I'm wondering whether that's a good, I don't know. I'm just sort of raising the issue that might get a little crowded in there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. And definitely we've been trying to think about, obviously the crosswalk has a certain legal standing. The RFB itself it's not a signal. And so, we've kind of been working on this design to allow the legal use of the crosswalk while the RFB is activated. So definitely looking for feedback on this design.
So other thoughts, we'll be interested in hearing other thoughts along that same question Robbie asked. Harl, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, maybe I'll start with that, and maybe this ties in with what Chris has said about the stretch between Main and between Proudfit and the path, where we have one block of offered bike lanes with possibly awkward transitions. We received a comment asking, why can't we do protected bike lanes here? Which we'd have to think about, would they be, probably they would be one-way protected bike lanes, because otherwise you'd have to have yet another transition. But I mean, I think the problem with this block of Main Street is, and why speeds are higher there, is it's a very wide roadway, parking is hardly utilized, and so it really is this wide open space that really invites people to go fast. And so I do have some concerns that just putting buffered bike lanes there, which means there will never be any cars parked there, which visually narrow the corridor, will actually not help with the speeding issue, except that it does provide a space for bikes. So thinking about what can be done to reduce this illusion of like this image of like a wide open space that people speed through, I think that would be good to think about. And maybe having a protected bike lane where you have concrete planters taking up some space or something like that. I think that would be good. And then we'd have to think about how does that translate into this intersection design? And I'm not totally sure if I have a good answer to that. Do you maybe just quickly respond to the protected bike lane idea? Is that something that you have considered or would be interested in considering?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's off the table. I mean, I think everyone here is aware. Obviously, the highest protection definitely increases the cost to the city budget, but I don't think it's off the table. And I think it's definitely something to consider. Particularly, this is a great area. It doesn't have a lot of driveways, doesn't have garbage carts, so it definitely lends itself. It's already connected to a path that's being cleared. So I think as locations go, it definitely is something that we can take a deeper look at as we work on this block.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm curious what you can come up with there. I think it's worth investigating because, especially with the driveways, as you said, that's good. Question about the Southwest Path crossing. Did you talk to the railway? Because we know we've had these issues of no stop signs because there's a railway crossing, and do they have any ability to block what is being proposed here?
We've definitely been in coordination with the railroad quite a bit and continue to be so as the design develops. But everything that we've shown so far, they're okay with. Just making sure that we're kind of keeping our limits is, a certain distance away from the railroad tracks. They'll be okay with it, is what we've heard.
Okay, good. Thanks. You mentioned part of this project is going to be mill and overlay. I'm assuming that's not out of the TAP funding. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Yep.
Or could be part of the city resurfacing.
Yeah, we're just doing that because making these improvements when there's a pretty big crack right in the area where a bike would ideally want to be riding now feels like it really needs to be fixed if we're going to make these other improvements.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks. Just wanted to be sure. And then you mentioned the traffic volumes in the various stretches. I believe all of those are above the NACDOR recommendation for than what the recommendations are for bike boulevards. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So that's definitely something that we're continuing to look at. We're not coming with any sort of recommendations today, but it's something that we did include in the public meeting, talking about the idea of traffic diversion, things like that. We know there's also some improvements that are coming, at Bassett and Broome with some future engineering projects. So we're going to try to look at that whole thing and come up with some plans related to what we've heard so far. And, as Alder Verveer mentioned, going to another neighborhood meeting, and we really need to do some additional traffic counts around that, as some of the counts that we have, were during when West Washington was on, and we kind of need to know where people are entering and exiting so we can offer some more in that area. But we do know that they're above what would be recommended for a bike boulevard.
Okay. Yeah, I would definitely encourage you to keep investigating that, diversion, as you said, figuring out where the people who say turn right from Proudfit onto Main, do they all just go to the, GHC parking lot, or do they continue toward the Capitol? Is it really, and if, investigating that, and I guess you have the streetlight data that might help you with some of that, figuring out where people are actually driving to, and then making some informed decision about potential diversion. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
Harold, how about sharing the median between pedestrians and bicyclists?
Well, honestly, I'm not super concerned about that. I don't think there's huge volumes there of, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Other thoughts with regard to the project or sharing the median with bikes and pedestrians? Any Chris, go ahead.
I'll just, I was going back and forth on whether to weigh in, but I assume you're talking about the picture we're looking at. I was thinking about this. I think the median is serving a legal purpose. And in reality, plenty of folks are just going to sort of go straight. And I'm sure it's going to be not a very high median and sort of go over or around it. So I'm not really concerned about it. I guess while we have this up, when Harold was talking about options on Main Street, I am kind of wondering if there's opportunities earlier to start that transition, because it looks like the way this is laid out, cyclists are going to be kind of directed to weave in towards the median and then back out right at the crossing and then back into the bike lane again. So there's a lot of viewing motions. I don't know if there's, I don't know. Nothing's a big deal.
So is there any, does anybody have any concerns with regard to folks with mobility issues, pedestrians with mobility issues, or anybody with disabilities, if you have medians that are shared between bicycles and pedestrians?
I would say, it's obviously we have those now on paths. So.
Denise, go ahead.
In general, I do, but here I don't, because I think either Chris or Harold said it's just not a high traffic area. I'm thinking about how much I walk, and I've never crossed here. I've crossed other places, but yeah, I'm not worried about it here.
Okay, great. Okay, other comments or questions? Darren, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess with respect to that, my question is, because I have used this intersection, and without it being signalized or any beacons, I've had to stop at the median. I'm hoping if it is beaconized, that people will be able to continue across and won't feel the need to have to stop on the median. But I'm not sure if staff has any thoughts on.
Yeah,
you're not going to predict human behavior. I understand that. But
right. I mean, right. We do know, right. Compliance for yielding, even with an RFB, isn't perfect. But the idea is with the RFBs, you would be crossing in one shot. And so the idea is that, the use of that would be kind of different than it is now, where, yes, you often are kind of trapped in that space, attempting to get a gap or getting cars to yield. And right now, bikes are kind of just in a bike box, and there's some uncertainty for motor vehicles if they should be yielding or if they shouldn't. And I think the RFB will help clean that up and clarify that that's on and that's a sign that they should be yielding.
So the combination of all of the changes that you're suggesting should work together to address those issues.
Yeah, that's the intent with this. And obviously we'll need to monitor it. We know that this is a very busy intersection, particularly at rush hour for crossing.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Erin, Renee, are you getting all the feedback that you were looking for? Anything else you wanted feedback on?
I think that's good. Yeah, I think this is some really good feedback for us to take back as we continue to work on this project and do a little bit more engagement with the neighborhood, but should get us in a good space to continue moving forward with STOT on the federal process to get this completed next year.
Great. Okay, last call for comments. Okay, thanks very much.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Erin. Thanks, Renee. So I'll ask again before we go on to 6. Do we have that person for item 1 yet?
No.
Nope. Okay. So we'll go on to item 6, which is Fox Knoll. Who do we have for that, Jim?
Should have Sean Malloy, and he's sharing his screen.
Okay, great. Hey, Sean.
All right. Hello, everyone. So today I have a plat for mostly residential neighborhood on the far west side of town. Old Sauk and Pioneer are the boundaries for on the plat, and this is the far western edge of the city. West of Pioneer is Middleton, and also north of Old Sauk. So we're just kind of continuing the street network that was built to the south, the Willows plat, and I'll zoom in. Dimensions are a little hard to see unless you zoom in. So most of the streets are 28-foot streets that have single-family homes on them, with exception to Tawny Elm, which is the easternmost street in this plat. That is 36. We are anticipating some denser housing on the east side of Tony Elm, so that allows for a little more parking. Tony Elm also is a collector-like street. I guess I'll call it a minor collector that connects from Old Sauk to Mineral Point Road. So that's 36, and then Fox Knoll. It's kind of another mini collector-ish street, I guess I'd say, that goes from Pioneer to Sugar Maple in the future, and that we have at 32. So it will connect east with the next plat, and that's about it. I guess I'd like to point out that on Pioneer Road we aren't doing sidewalk, which is unusual, but that was a decision that was made when the 2018 Elderberry and Pioneer neighborhood development plans came out. And the thought was that, this was the edge of the city, and with a lot of lots fronting Clear Pond Way and Pioneer Road, we didn't want lots to be, I guess, double booked with sidewalk, so to speak. And that decision was made at that time. We are planning to do actually, I have the Elderberry neighborhood plan here. This is, I guess, an excerpt from it. We are planning on doing a bike lane in the northbound direction on our side of the right of way. That will happen in the future when Pioneer is built out. So Pioneer is kind of a strange street, I guess I'd say. Half of it's ours, half of it's Middleton. We're planning to do curb on our side, and Middleton's planning to do just a shoulder and a ditch on their side. So it's I guess the border of the city there. I guess with that, I can take any questions. Oh, I guess I'll also say Old Sauk Road. In the future, we're setting the curb up so that we can have buffered bike lanes on Old Sauk when that project comes through, where we build the north side. In this section, Old Sauk will be an 80-foot right of way, and that tapers down, or I guess it goes up to 120 as you head east at Shave Road, and that the buffer bike lanes we plan to continue, I guess, on Old Sauk when we do that project. So we're setting that up for that in the future.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Do we have any registrants on this item?
We do not.
I beg your pardon?
No, we do not.
Okay. Alderman Yazzie, go ahead.
I just wanted to see if by chance you're able to connect with Middleton to see if they want to partner in on those bike lanes.
So we did, I believe in 2018, which now seems like a long time ago. We did talk with them, during the neighborhood planning process. And I guess it was something they didn't, close the door on, but something that they weren't interested in at the time. I definitely think that when the Pioneer Road project comes up in the future, something we can revisit, and hopefully, they change their mind, because it'd be nice to have a more typical roadway. That's I guess uniform and the same on both sides. But at the time in 2018, they were not interested in that.
Yeah, I would love to if you revisit that and just to see what they say when it comes time to. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alder. Robbie, go ahead.
So I know that Pioneer Road to the west, the other jurisdiction is Town of Middleton, not City of Middleton. Is the north side of Old Sauk also Town of Middleton, or is it City of Middleton?
That is a good question. That's also town. Yeah.
It's town. Okay. I just wanted to ask because I am familiar with efforts to try and get bike lanes on Old Sauk Road and Town of Middleton actually rejecting Dane County's offer to split the cost to put bike lanes in, and they absolutely refused to do it, angering a lot of people who bike out this way to get out to the driftless area. So I just wanted to clarify, especially if Alder Miazzi is going to contact or talk to them, that you're talking to the right jurisdiction. It's Town of Middleton, not city, just FYI.
Thanks for the clarification. That is disheartening to hear.
Yeah, Alder Miazzi, your hand's still up. Did you have something further?
No, I think people cleared it pretty good for me. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. All right, Harold, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Bridget's first. I beg your pardon, Harold. Bridget was ahead of you. Oh, now Bridget's hand went down. Okay, go ahead, Bridget.
Sorry. I was just putting it down since you called on me. And I was just going to mention the same thing. I think Robbie and I were involved in the same situation. I will say, though, that the Department of Natural Resources is interested in working with the City of Madison and Middleton as well, though we're redeveloping the area out there for the Cross Plains complex. And so City of Madison folks, please keep that in mind, that we expect in the next couple of years that the traffic is going to increase pretty significantly going out in that direction with the National Park Service headquarters there and quite a bit of work that will go on to attract recreational users, and a lot of whom will be going out there by bicycle.
Okay, so touching base back again might be good. And it sounds like maybe the county will, continue with their willingness to share in the cost of that. So that'd be great. Thanks, Bridget and Robbie and Alder Miazzi. Harold, go ahead. Sorry about getting you out of order there.
No worries. Along those same lines, and I don't know if you have like the bike plan map ready. I'm just wondering, Pioneer is the only north-south connection that goes like straight through. But I don't know. I also know there's a lot of development happening there. So what's the idea like for people who want to go north-south from like, say, Valley View to Old Sauk? Like what will the bike route be for that?
So our plan for that was the use of sugar maple. Our plan for that was to always have bike lanes on that, and that becomes shaved. So that actually connects from Blackhawk all the way down to Valley View with some pieces not connected, but soon that will connect from Old Sauk. No, I'm sorry, from Mineral Point to Valley View. That will be connected, but we'll still have that missing gap, I guess, from Mineral Point to Old Sauk. So that was kind of our plan. And then that meets up with the path that goes by the Pope Farm Elementary School as well. So I guess, the farthest west bike route that we were planning was Sugar Maple. And then the thought was that, a street like Tawny Elm, which goes from Old Sauk to Mineral Point, it would be a bikeable street because of the lower density on that street.
Renee, did you have any other comments in that regard? Is Renee still on? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I am. Sorry, having trouble with my unmute there. I think, obviously right now Pioneer is traveled pretty heavily by people riding out kind of on that area. And I think Sean kind of covered some street options that, in that north-south direction.
Yeah, I think that answers my question. I guess I would just encourage you to, as developments happen, to keep in mind that whatever the north-south connection is going to be, and it sounds like Sugar Maple makes a lot of sense, to make sure that the facilities there are accessible for people of all ages and abilities. As I mean, yes, it's single-family residential, but that unfortunately doesn't always mean that there's low traffic volume. So keeping in mind to choose the right facilities for the volume of traffic now and the volume of traffic 5 or 10 years from now. But we're getting farther and farther away from this particular project. So I will stop here.
Okay. All right. But it's part of the connection. So I appreciate that forward thinking. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. Could you clarify, you were saying at some point about not including sidewalks, but it looks like there's sidewalks on this plan.
Yeah, sorry. So the sidewalk, and I can zoom in. We're not including sidewalk on Pioneer Road itself.
Okay.
That was the decision, I guess, made in 2018 that with the neighborhood plan. So I did, I guess, like to bring up, Old Sauk. We're also not. I guess planning sidewalk on the south side of Old Sauk between Pioneer and Windy Willow. However, we are going to plan to grade it so that we can install it in the future, so that if someday Town of Middleton to the west install a sidewalk, we're not creating a gap. So, we can always do with a future project. Most of the frontage is ours anyways. This outlot here is for storm. So, it's either we pay for it now and it goes nowhere, or we have the potential to build it later if there's a gap in the sidewalk network.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't have the detailed drawing pulled up when you were talking, so I couldn't see and then look back after. Thanks.
Can you perhaps explain why you decided not to put sidewalks in?
So at Pioneer, that was based on, I guess, neighborhood development plan and something that, the south, we did not, install it with those. But Old Sauk, we didn't want to create a dead end, I guess, scenario. But we wanted to make it as easy as possible to install in the future. Because it is a pretty lengthy stretch, I guess, that you go, and there'd be nowhere, it would be a dead end. And with it being our property and our frontage, we didn't think a lot of people would be using it, I guess, unless Middleton builds sidewalks. So the plan would be if Town of Middleton installs a sidewalk on Old Sauk, we would install a sidewalk.
Okay. Renee, I mean, that's 4 years ago. Any changes in thoughts with regard to sidewalks between then and now?
I mean, obviously, we don't like to have gaps in the sidewalk. It's always hard at the sort of edge of the community, parcels. I mean, obviously, it would be ideal to connect it to the facilities that are in the town of Middleton. But we can't make them put in the sidewalk to do that connection. True. So, obviously this is a city property, and this is a particular situation where this is easier for us to fill in as the opportunity would exist to connect this to the facilities that exist to the west. So, a lot of times if it is residential property, we would recommend to do it right now because putting it in later is very difficult. Whereas on a city property, it is, we just would budget for it when the time is right. But you all know that I love sidewalks and I do love to have them connected. But this really is just going to the edge of the city and isn't getting you to anything at this point. So.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify because I do share your love of sidewalks. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, same here. So that makes total sense to me on Old Sauk. Could you help me understand a little bit more about why no sidewalks on Pioneer? I'm not so familiar with that road. Is there residential? What's the story there and the rationale for no sidewalk?
Yeah, so Pioneer is kind of it's an interesting street. So it's, it's all, I guess, single family out here. And the way that this network was planned was that Clear Pond Way, it goes actually pretty good distance for a narrow street. It actually connects all the way down to Merrill Point and beyond, and a lot of lots are backing onto Pioneer and fronting onto Clear Pond. So the thought was that anyone trying to go north and south would use the sidewalk on Clear Pond. It's more of a local street, and that the sidewalk on Pioneer would have been redundant. At least that was the thinking in 2018. So, it also would create a situation that we have, but isn't desirable, where you have lots that have sidewalk on both sides of their lots, so that they have to do snow removal on the front and back of their lot, which isn't ideal for property owners. So that was a consideration, but I think the usage of Clear Pond was kind of the main driver. That we were expecting people using the sidewalk to be using that rather than Pioneer.
Thanks. That makes a lot of sense. I didn't understand that the folks would have had street on both their front and back side. So I get it. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments or questions for Sean and Renee? Okay. Seeing none. Thanks very much. Okay, before we go to item 7, I'll just ask again, do we have the speaker for number 1?
We do not.
No? Okay, maybe decided not to come. Okay, Chris, did you guys set a record with the longest TPPB meeting so far on Monday?
I'm not even sure we did. But it was, so our last meeting was the 3rd installment of the transit network redesign meeting, where we went through the 20 or 20-ish amendments, approved all the staff recommended amendments, plus one over off of South Park Street, I think, a little more service in one neighborhood. And I think, there were concerns about the process, and Alderman Yazzie raised a lot of concerns about how the equity analysis will play out. But I think generally folks felt like it was the right point to move forward, and then it made it through council last night. So I think that's pretty much been the bulk of TPPB's work the last few weeks.
Yeah, it was definitely a long conversation, both at the policy board and at the Common Council. And, congratulations to, everybody for all the hard work, and congratulations to every alder and all of the members of the community who brought forward feedback as well. There'll be plenty of opportunities as items come before the Transportation Commission to have public feedback as well, and opportunities for more meetings as the details are worked out. Justin, I guess I'll give you an opportunity to, number 1, say congratulations. And do you have any other comments? Because it's going to be, one of the things that was discussed at TPPB, right, Chris, was what are the next steps after this, particularly with regard to the equity analysis?
I don't know if Justin's there. I think it's out of TPPB's hands now. And Justin's there, but I guess his camera's off. I don't know if he's at his computer or not. But I do know that I'm here. That there will be. Okay. Yeah, because there's a lot of the implementation steps that will be coming to TC, and there was a lot of discussion about the next steps, Justin, and the importance of the equity analysis and the detail going into planning where the bus stops exactly are going to go and schedules, et cetera. So again, congratulations, and any additional comments, because there was a lot of discussion both at TPPB and at the Common Council.
So just thank you all. I know several of you joined in the meeting, either one or both of the meetings. And so just thank you for for that. Obviously, it was a couple long nights between the TPBB and then the council last night, but I think ultimately we made some amendments and made the plan better, and I think more responsive to community concerns. Ultimately, we're never going to satisfy everyone with any change, but I feel confident that we got the vast majority of people's concerns addressed. And then as far as next steps, so that kind of pushes us into the implementation details phase. So there's kind of three parallel paths that are going to go from here. One is to do that equity analysis. Now that we've got a plan, the council has kind of adjudicated those 20 plus amendments. We know what plan to actually analyze. So we'll go through that process of analyzing it. In parallel, we'd be working hard on bus stops to identify what bus stops need to be added, removed, or modified in some way, and moving through that process. And then finally, the detailed scheduling. So to figure out exactly what time the buses, are going to pull out of the garage, and what the detailed schedules are that will enable us to actually do a run cut and basically break those runs into driver shifts and to know exactly how many drivers it's going to take. Obviously, we've got an estimate based on previous planning, but it's a lot more work to get to a firm number. So those three things will go in parallel. Ultimately, we hope to have them all done by the fall and bring that package back to the TC and most likely the council, just because of the sensitivity, and for a final approval of all of those details before we move into implementation. At that point, once all those details have been approved and we are moving forward, we'll have very robust outreach around, how to use the new system, how it will operate, how your trip will change. A lot of just on the ground, face-to-face interactions with a lot of our riders, trip planners on our websites, things like that, to move towards an implementation in June of 2023.
Okay, Alder Harrington McKinney, go ahead.
Thank you. I had to pull over so that I could make a comment. I recognize the work that staff did for this, and there's some awesome things. We really did need to move in a direction that we're moving, and I was comfortable with that. I voted no, and the reason that I voted no is that I still had questions, and I'm always looking for the community voices, and especially that the equity analysis is actually done. And so that constituted my no vote, but I absolutely am really confident that we'll get to a place, that we'll land in a place. Everybody, we heard that there will be trade-offs. I get that. But what is really important is that now that this will be in the TC's hands, that we really begin to look and have opportunities for the community to engage. And how it's not the engagement intellectually, it's the engagement where people are. And I think that's where we miss the boat, is that we make presentations, and I'm making an assumption because I wasn't at all of them, but for the ones that I was at, it is so complex to understand. And so as we start making these decisions about stops and where the buses will stop and all of that, is that we do have space for public comment, and that as we have space or create space for public comment, that we are cognizant of who we're working with and to break it down into language that's understandable. I think that's what the challenge for me was, and for all, people of color, with people with disabilities, all of those things that we need to take into consideration. So, Justin, I tip my hat to you and your staff. I want you to really know that. My vote no was because I really had to, because there was still some questions related to the equity thing that I needed to make sure that we fully addressed. Thank you very much.
So one of the things that Justin will have to, maybe we can have an agenda item where we talk about when the time is right, how to plan what's going to come to which TC meeting so that we can make sure that we have adequate time at each meeting for the items that come. The equity analysis will come to the TC, is that correct?
Yeah, so I would expect to bring all three of those elements together. But yes, they would most likely we would just, because of the sensitivity and the size of it, we would bring it to, we would introduce it at council, refer it to TC, and then ultimately have the full council vote.
Okay. So again, we may look to ask TC members if we can maybe have an extra meeting, thrown in. We'll have to look very carefully at that, because if we have a public hearing, which we plan to have a public hearing, we want to allow adequate time for that. So just, Justin, far enough ahead of time, we can look to, this is a huge issue that, obviously, 5.5 hour meeting at the policy board, not all on this, but a biggest chunk of that on it. It's a lot to talk about. So we want to make sure we plan it in such a way that we allow adequate time for the public feedback in the appropriate way, along with all the other meetings that I'm sure that you'll plan as well. So Alder Miadzi, go ahead.
I won't try to delay too much of what has already been said, but I recall last night I just asked for 2 weeks to see if we can have NAACP join the discussion when we're talking about this racial analysis study. So I don't know if Justin, if he gives me a head up, I think it's important that to actually even have a discussion where NAACP talks about the equity stance on, or even to help out with that. I think that's important. Secondly, I just wanted to say that something was said that I think is incorrect. I voiced my opinion last night on the Common Council floor in regards to the BRT. But what was amazing is that the TPB board made history. And when I say they made history in the fact that actually I didn't get a chance to speak on that board, which is amazing because they have always allowed alders to speak. And in fact, Gary Halverson, one of the alders, was able to speak and voice his opinion. But when I raised my hand, the TPB board concluded the meeting and said alders aren't allowed to speak, and concluded the meeting, which was very shocking to me that some of the people on that board sit on this committee and that actually knew I was on this committee. So for alder not to speak and hearing when I actually listens to the voices of my constituents, and Justin knows I've been involved in this process, even having meetings in my district. So it was shocking to hear that, to have people not have me voice my opinion as an alder. So just that was said incorrectly. So I just want to acknowledge that I didn't get to speak at the TPB meeting. Thank you.
Well, thanks for your thoughts, Alder. Justin, if you want to hook up with Alder Miadzi separately so that you can have that conversation about the NAACP and how you might be able to use that resource. Chris, go ahead.
I'd be happy to talk to Alder Miadzi offline about that sort of thing. But I think what happened, just so folks know, is the agenda was intended to be a public hearing and only and no discussion. So none of the board members were having any discussion either. So the guidance we had was that we should close the meeting and not have any other discussion, including alders. But I understand what you're saying, Alder.
So perhaps Alder Halverson got green lighted by mistake to talk. Is that what you're suggesting, Chris? Yeah. Well, we try very hard at TC to be inclusive, Alderman Yazzie. Go ahead.
So just in future reference, if that was something that was a concern, I think right away, you have something called point of order where you stop it right away rather than having to go on for 5 minutes. Then when he gets done, after I raise my hand, then to conclude a meeting, that's totally different. And a statement versus a discussion. If you look in the Webster Dictionary, there's a definition between and true distinction between the two of them. I understand a discussion and understand me even making a statement. I could have made a statement, which I'm going to say this, that I appreciate Justin and his staff doing an excellent job as far as community outreach to me, my constituents, hearing voices, hours and hours spent on this discussion about BRT, but still I do have some concerns, and as my constituents do. So I don't take any credit away from Justin and his staff on the work that they do, but I look at everything as an equity stance of trying to make sure that all voices are heard, not just my constituents on this side of town, but when I was looking at the Madison as a whole, there was concerns I had, like this other concern, making sure that NAACP is involved to make sure this is done in an equitable for the whole city, not just my district, but the whole city. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Alder, your comments are certainly heard, and we happen to have a discussion about inclusion scheduled for our very next meeting, which is a topic we've been working on as a commission. And Steve Briss from the City Attorney's Office is on our meeting, and he's been kind enough to attend pretty much all our meetings, I think. And as we look to schedule these meetings on this very important topic that was just, covered at the TPPB, we will work with Steve to make sure that if we do decide to have a public hearing where we don't have any discussion, which is what TPPB did, just in order to make sure we have enough time for the public hearing, that we'll make very sure that we have it properly noticed and that we conduct the meeting appropriately. So Steve will involve you in those plans if you would be willing to do that, so that we can make sure that we do that appropriately. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. So first of all, I do want to just say thank you to Justin, Metro staff, and the members of the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. You have all had some really late nights, so thank you. And the job's not done yet, so I just want to say thank you. I continue to be hopeful, watchful about how folks with disabilities will be impacted, because we are all over the city, and some of us will be positively impacted and some of us will be negatively impacted. That's just how this is going to roll realistically. So I'm thinking about what are the resources that Metro can make available for folks with disabilities to learn the new system. And really thinking about what impacts is this going to be for paratransit. So I just want to name these things out loud and get them on our collective radar. I have heard from some of our constituents that there's concern that they'll need to use paratransit more frequently because the fixed route system may not work for them as well. And, there are concerns about paratransit. So I think we just have to kind of be prepared too for the potential dominoes and look at the implications of that. And then my question is starting to think ahead about the resources for really helping people learn to use the new network. And I really love the trip planner folks, and the customer service folks are outstanding. I had a really unfortunate issue happen with a bus stop, and I won't go into it. It's not appropriate here, but I called customer service, and the person I talked with stayed on the phone with me while I safely crossed Lake and Johnson to get to an open bus stop. And she was outstanding. And I've gotten such good customer support. So your trip planners, all of those folks are amazing. I'm wondering if Metro currently has travel training, and if so, kind of how to really utilize that service as people are learning the new system, and if not, how we can, have travel training services available for folks that are really going to need the assistance to learn a whole new system. So thanks again so much for all the work.
Okay, so that's something that we'll definitely put on the list. Justin, you probably already have it on the list for the next step, which is headed our way.
Yep, those are active discussions that we're having around the travel training, especially.
Okay. Well, I so appreciate everybody who's been paying attention to this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, but over 3,000 messages from people. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been reading a lot of stuff. Everybody's been reading a lot of stuff. So we're all trying our best to keep up with where we are now, but there's still a lot moving forward. So look to see this on our agendas in the future. But thanks to both Chris and Alder Harrington McKinney and Alder Biazzi and everybody else for all the involvement that we've had so far, and look to see where we go with it next. So anything else from TPPB?
Nope.
Okay, thanks, Chris. That was enough, right? I don't have any announcements other than was going to comment on the network redesign, which we already talked about. In terms of for the next meeting, we have a listing in Legistar for potential agenda items for the June 22nd meeting. And future meetings as well. Does anybody have anything else that you would like to see considered for a future agenda? It's not shown already. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask a question that I'm not totally sure if that's about a future agenda item. And I was late in joining the meeting, so I'm not sure if this was acknowledged that there was a traffic fatality on Mineral Point Road on early Tuesday morning. And so I'm wondering if, I don't know if Yang is on the call or Renee, if you can talk about this. I mean, we approved the design for Mineral Point Road as part of the BRT project, but I do wonder if in this terms of Vision Zero, where review crashes, and maybe rethink some of that, if that is something that is at all on the radar.
No, Harold,
Madam Chair.
I beg your pardon? Yes, that's nice.
Chris. I just want to say that we are going a little bit far afield here. We're engaging in discussion rather than just talking about topics for the next agenda. And I don't think we should do that at this point. If we wanted to have this on the agenda, we should notice it for the next meeting.
Okay. So thank you, Steve. So Harold, I think that the traffic fatality on Mineral Point Road, we can ask Yang and perhaps Lieutenant Fiore if that could be covered under the quarterly traffic safety report, or if we could have a special report like we did on East Washington Avenue. So I'll work with Yang and Lieutenant Fiore to see how best to include that on a future agenda topic. Okay. And thank you, Steve, for keeping us in line there. Much appreciated. Any other topics for future agendas that aren't showing? Okay. As always, great meeting, everybody. Do we have I assume we don't have anybody registered to speak there?
Correct.
No.
Nope, not there. Okay. All right. We'll look for a motion to adjourn. And again, thank everybody for the great participation. Harold?
So moved.
Turn right onto Wisconsin 23 East, Wisconsin 23.
Do you have a second?
Second, McKinney.
Okay. There's a second from Alder Harrington McKinney. I assume everybody's in favor of adjourning, and we'll assume a unanimous consent vote. And thanks, everybody. Much appreciated. Take care.
23 East for 19 miles.